Dream Team? It's your boy D Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with Mr. Chavda again. I can't say that name, and I'm so sorry. I butcher it every time. But America's Dark Truth Hidden from the World Population. This is a very long podcast. We are going to break it down into 3 different segments. Before we jump in, make sure you guys subscribe, ring notification bell, get a video a thumbs up. Let's hear about America's Dark Truth.
Does Obama have blood on his hands?
More than Bush.
More than Bush?
More than Bush. If you talk about total tonnage, the total amount of ammunition that was dropped on innocent civilians, you add up the totals for George W. Bush, you add up the totals for Obama, Obama comes up on top.
I think it was called Two Indias, where he spoke about one great aspect of it, about the culture and spiritualism. And then he backed it up with like Islamophobia and all that the world knows India as today.
I disagree with this completely. And Veer Das, in order to become famous there, went there and made all these statements on a public stage, which I think is shameful. He should be ashamed of himself.
Namaste from India. If you're an American watching or listening to this podcast, firstly, this is not meant to offend you in any form. I'm patriotic about India because I'm an Indian. You're patriotic about USA because you were born there. In saying that, modern day news media doesn't give us the news that's actually happening out there. Modern day textbooks teach us a slightly altered form of history. And media in general is very likely showing us what powerful people in powerful places want us to see and listen to.
Factual.
That's the point of podcasts. Today we have Abhijit Chavda bringing part 3 of our World History special. This one is about America. America has always been a country that's inspired me in countless ways, but it's also important to talk about some real world scenarios. Now, what are those scenarios? You will get to know them over the course of this episode. For now, make sure you follow us on Spotify. TRS is a Spotify exclusive. Every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. This is historian Abhijit Chavda, who returns on the Ranveer Show.
I'm actually very excited to jump into this. I know a lot of Americans do get offended easily. I'm not one of them. I just feel like America is a place. Like, I love America. Like, I love living here. It's cool, but I don't get offended when people talk about America. And I feel like America is definitely hides a lot of truth from us. They definitely, all the information we get fed, America's a good guy, America's a hero. It's like America does no wrong, as in the American media eyes. So we definitely don't get fed any dark truths, any bad past, any bad history. Definitely been altered history. So it's cool when I get to kind of look at different countries like exposing certain truths, and I'm like shocked, and I'm like, nah, they never taught us this. But I'm excited to jump into this.
This one's called Dear America, and I sincerely hope that it reaches out to all our American friends. Keep in mind, as with any episode with Mr. Abhijit Chavda, we will be talking about controversial subjects that will offend some people. That is not our intention. Our intention is to correct the history that you were possibly taught in an alternative way. And our intention is to put real news out there, not the news that's fed to you by traditional media portals, but the real news that you could get through podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience or Lex Friedman. This time it's an Indian podcast. It's the Ranveer Show. Welcome to the Ranveer Show, Abhijit Chavda, sir.
Thank you, Ranveer. Thank you.
How was part 1 and 2 for you?
Very interesting. Good talking.
Okay. It was all about the World War, the Cold War. Before that, I think we started recording episodes since a year ago, and we've done a bunch of episodes on geopolitics. You're a scientist, you're a historian, so we've covered a range of topics. Today, we're specifically going to talk about America. Before we get into the geopolitical details, I'm going to chalk out a 32-year time period from about 1990 till 2022. I learned all my geopolitics from you. And one of the first things you ever told me about geopolitics is that you can only truly understand geopolitics when you view things in a 20 to 30 year time frame. what's happened in the last 30 years in America?
A whole lot has happened in America and the world. First of all, we had the end of the Cold War, the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, the Iron Curtain came down, communism was defeated, the USSR broke up, the US won, and everything was supposed to be great ever after. All the world's problems were over. There would be democracy and peace and love and liberalism everywhere, and the world would be the greatest place ever for forever, essentially. But that's not quite what happened. We are an aggressive warlike species, and we have had wars after war after war. You had the Gulf War, the first Gulf War in the early 90s. I think it was 91. Then you had a war in the Balkans. It was part of the Soviet bloc. Then the entire country, Yugoslavia, disintegrated, and all these small little nations came out of that. It was a continuation of a very old conflict that began even before World War I. So that's what happened. The US had a major role to play in that. Then you had the second Gulf War, in which Saddam Hussein was finally ousted and eventually he was dispatched. Then you had Libya, and you had all kinds of other things that happened. You had unipolarity for quite some time after 1991. The world was a unipolar place. There was only one superpower. And then you saw the rise of China, the continuing ascent of China to a major role to play in the geopolitical global scenario. China is not quite a superpower yet, but it aspires to be one. It aspires to replace the US as the sole superpower in the next 20, 30 years maximum.
Okay, I have to dial back a little bit.
Really?
To the start of this podcast and the end of the last one. We spoke about the Cold War and broke down the geopolitical angles and the psychology behind the Cold War. As always, it was for money and it was for power and it was for territory. But it was masked as a fight between two ideologies. On one side, we have the capitalistic democratic USA, and on the other side, we have the communist Russia, basically. Eventually, Russia loses. Now, this is the gimmick that we're speaking about. Do you think that American officials actually believe that their ideology would sustain in the long term? That's one question. And two, what was the need to go to war if your main rival has already been ousted? If that main rival is already crumbling and is dying, why should a country go to war? Is it for further expansion? Is it to strengthen your position at the top? What's the logic and the psychology of American officials in the early 90s, according to you?
I love these questions, and I'm excited to hear the answers.
So it's all about consolidating power and accessing the most amount of resources. So what was happening is that Saddam Hussein was an ally of the US. He was essentially a client of the US.
Heard about that.
The Americans had this dispute, this conflict with the Iranians that dates back to 1979, the Islamic Revolution in Iran, in which the US-backed puppet Shah of Iran was ousted. An Islamic government came into power, led by the Ayatollahs, Ayatollah Khomeini, and so on. And they took lots of Americans hostage. The American embassy was stormed and all that. So Iran became a big enemy of the US, and the US wanted retribution. They wanted to take revenge for that, and they wanted to punish Iran for behaving in this manner. So they utilized Iraq as the proxy for bleeding Iran. And then you had a long-standing conflict, the Iran-Iraq war that went on for the best part of a decade. So that is how they used Saddam Hussein. So they gave Saddam Hussein everything he wanted, Western support, arms, ammunition, money, most likely. And they propped him up and they used him as the tool to blunt Iran with. Now, the war eventually ground down to a stalemate, and they eventually had a ceasefire. And then I think Saddam Hussein started becoming too big for his boats and too big for the Americans' liking. He wanted to... what he did, the Americans led him to believe that they were in favor of him invading and taking over Kuwait. Kuwait is a small little country, but it's a major oil producer. And Saddam Hussein wanted to take over Kuwait and enrich himself at their expense.
America said,
so the Americans kind of led Saddam Hussein to believe that it was okay to go ahead and do this. And the moment he did that, they declared war on him. So they created this entire coalition of multiple parties, multiple powers. I believe India was also invited. India refused most likely at that time. India was not a major geopolitical player at the time. So there was this war in 1991. I think it was in February 91. I was a kid at the time, but I kind of remember that. So there was an invasion of Iraq, a massive shock and awe campaign. I don't even know how many civilians were wiped out in that, but yeah, it's all right as long as the US does it. Massive aerial bombardment of Baghdad. There was bombardment in other places as well. Civilian targets were wiped out, flattened to the ground. Basra was targeted. Many other places were targeted, and the Iraqi country was devastated.
See, I feel like I knew about Saddam Hussein. In the beginning, I thought he was an enemy from the jump. And then I watched a video of Volker Pisper's German satire. And learned this information that he's telling us that like Saddam was actually, the USA actually backed Saddam when they were trying to attack Iran. I didn't know that the USA led him to believe that it was okay to attack Kuwait and then turn their back and attacked him for attacking Kuwait. I just thought Saddam Hussein, Iran came to a stalemate. Saddam, like he said, got too big for his boots, wanted money and power, had weapons, had the army, so he decided, well, let me turn around and attack Kuwait. Can't get Iran. Let me turn around and attack Kuwait. And America was like, no, like, we not having that. But I never knew that America led him to believe that it was okay and then turn their back. And as soon as he actually did it, that's when they did that. And it's absolutely horrific. When places go to war and everything, that there's going to be civilian casualties. I absolutely hate that. I can't stand that. But it sounds like America just went over there and slaughtered a lot of innocent civilians, which I absolutely hate to my core, dog. Like that upsets me so freaking much. But I know America has a dark past, and I know like the U.S. does this. That Iraq and Iran and Saddam Hussein ain't the only ones U.S. done did this to, and those innocent civilians aren't the only innocents that the U.S. has done this to. But I'll let them keep going.
The nation of Iraq was devastated. There was massive destruction, lots of casualties. Saddam Hussein remained in power, and then there was the final act of the war was the highway of death, in which massive convoys of Iraqi military vehicles retreating from Kuwait, going back into Iraq, were just wiped out from the air. Massive, just a massacre all across the highway. The photographs are horrible. It was a plain massacre. They were not trying to fight back, but that's what happened. But as long as you're killing the bad guy, it's all right? So that's what the US did, and
that's what they told us.
They were not able to.
They were the bad guy.
Saddam Hussein. That thing was done later on in 2003.
Do American citizens know about the truths of their nation? I'm assuming most don't, because they follow traditional news media, just like India. Traditional news media is always going to be slightly biased, if not completely biased. I don't know how many Americans are aware of the atrocities committed by their governments. Not them. I think the average American is an extremely friendly, knowledgeable person, at least the ones I've met on the coasts. But often the government and geopolitical agendas are not a correct representation of the people. Do the people know that the country has been sitting on the top and kind of orchestrating a lot of things all over the world?
See, I've lived in the US on multiple occasions, at least three times. And the Americans are nice people. They are very nice people. They are friendly. It's a very open society. They believe in democracy. They believe in freedom, all those things. And most of them believe that their country is a force for good. I'm not saying it's entirely an evil country or a force for evil, but there are many questionable things and things that are not great that the country has done. I think it's now quite openly available on the public domain in social media. It's available on Wikipedia. If you read Wikipedia, the number of regime change operations the US has done, the number of undemocratic coups they have orchestrated. I mean, it's not the hallmark of a country that believes in freedom and democracy and human rights. The track record of the US, right? So I think most Americans are not aware of this. Most Americans are taught a certain version of history. They are taught to be patriotic, which is good. Everybody should love their nation. Everybody should be patriotic. But you should also know the truth about your nation and what what its track record has been like. So I believe most Americans are not quite aware of the entirety of what the historical record is. They are taught history in a certain manner, as people are across the world. Everybody is taught history in a certain way. We in India are taught history in a very distorted manner. So we have a wrong understanding of our own history. And I think the same goes for the US. I believe that many of them still believe that Christopher Columbus was a great hero, a conquering hero, a good man, which is not the case. He
still celebrate
he was one of the
Thanksgiving.
first perpetrators of genocide in the Americas, a very evil person. And the entirety of the US, this land has been stolen from the true inhabitants, the Native Americans. It's been built on the backs of the slave labor of the African American
Yes.
people and so on.
Yes.
So many of these facts have been varnished or whitewashed out of history. Nowadays,
Yeah.
people are beginning to become aware of this, but I think there's still some way to go.
Okay.
Yes, I feel like we definitely, America definitely, or the average American definitely doesn't know a lot of this information. Like, until I actually started reacting to videos like about people from other countries commenting and talking about America, I didn't know any of this information. But he's right, it is all out there. It is online. It's a public domain. You can find YouTube videos about everything. Like, it's incredible, all the information that's out there if you actually just look. And as I've like reacted to a lot of videos I've seen amid the atrocities that America has committed. But yes, average citizen, we grow up and we're not taught any of this history. Like I said in the beginning, America's taught that we're always the good guys. And anybody that we go attack, anywhere we go attack, they're doing something wrong. They're doing something bad. They're the bad guy. They're the villain. We're the heroes. And you know what I'm saying? So we never know about our atrocities. And then when you listen to different videos and people explain the atrocities that America commits, you start to think like, Jesus, like, are we the villains? Like, know what I'm saying? We're the one committing these atrocities. We're killing innocent people. Like, are we the villains? But like I said, a lot of Americans do consume traditional media, like he said, and where we're told we're the good guys. So most Americans aren't going to know about the past because America does not teach its past. When we're in school, slavery barely gets covered at all. It gets kind of skipped over. You know what I'm saying? So we don't learn much about slavery. Anything that's dark about American history, we really don't learn. I think a lot of people have opened their eyes about Christopher Columbus, but most Americans still celebrate Thanksgiving. You feel me? Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. I love this conversation. I love this
Nowadays,
podcast.
people are beginning to become aware of this, but I think there's still some way to
Yeah.
go.
Okay.
Agreed.
Let's go back again to the early 90s. We were speaking about the Gulf War. What else happened in the 90s? America was trying to strengthen its position again, chase economic growth wherever it could, as would any geopolitical power in my eyes, in that position.
Yes.
Do you wish to speak about Bill Clinton? Do you wish to speak about his tenure and what he did, and how do you view him?
Bill Clinton is an interesting person. So he would be best remembered for that infamous Monica Lewinsky episode, but that's not
Yeah.
very interesting for me. That's no big deal. I would say that his major contribution is the Balkan War, the Balkan crisis that happened in the mid 90s, the expansion of NATO, which actually began with George Bush the senior. So in 1991 or whatever it was, they gave a verbal assurance to the USSR that if you agree to the reunification of Germany, we give you an assurance that NATO will not expand 1 inch eastwards from wherever the lines were. And by the mid 90s, that agreement was breached. Obviously, it was a verbal agreement; it was not signed.
Yeah.
And that's the excuse they found, that we don't have a formal agreement. It was just a verbal promise, and verbal promises are meant to be broken. So that's the kind of approach they had. NATO started expanding eastwards into the former Soviet bloc territories. That began the initial phase of that was under George Bush the senior. It continued under the presidency of Bill Clinton. Then there was this entire conflict in the Balkan region, the former Yugoslavia, the bombing of various the ancient enmity between these various ethnic groups. It all burst out into the open. The Serbs, the Croats, the atrocities that happened in World War II, World War I, the neo-Nazi elements within that, then the religious angle between the Bosniaks who were Muslims and the Croats and the Serbs who are Christian. It's a mess. The Balkans are a mess. The problems that they should have resolved in World War I and II still exist. Those wounds are still open. And the Americans went ahead and kind of reopened the wounds. They took sides. They bombed civilians. Lots of atrocities happened there. It's all available in the public domain. It's known. It's a fact.
The American army took part.
The NATO took part. So you don't say the Americans did it. You say NATO did it. But who owns NATO? It's the US. So you had Dutch Air Force pilots who were bombing civilians on behalf of NATO.
Wow.
That sort of thing. So that gives you kind of plausible deniability. But it is. We took a decision as a consensus. There is no leadership by consensus. If you know leadership is about one person. It's about the biggest fish in the pond that decides what's to be done.
I feel that.
In order to spread responsibility, you say it's NATO that has decided this. And NATO is a coalition of a number of countries or the whole of Western Europe. So you can say that it was, if there is guilt, it is collective guilt and collective responsibility. So human rights violations happen, though we deplore that. It's unfortunate. But, no one person is responsible for that. That sort of approach, it's always been that way.
Dialing
crazy.
back a little bit, this concept of precedents. Firstly, I don't think one human being can rule an entire country. That is definitely not the case.
No, it's not.
Let's kind of burst that precedent bubble for non-Americans who don't understand it too well or Americans who believe a little bit too much in it. What's the actual standpoint that you have as a geopolitical observer on this whole one precedent system? Why isn't there a group of people running America instead of just one president? Or the alternative question is there a secret group actually running America? And
I think the alternative. I've said it a lot. I feel like I could be completely wrong because I don't know politics too much. But I just feel like the president is like a figurehead for the country. You feel me? I don't believe it's end all be all with the president. I believe what he said. It's the secret group that run the country. You feel me? But like the owners of like large corporations, and you feel me? Those with the most money in their pockets really run ish. That's how I feel. I think the president is just a figurehead. I like this. I like this podcast. I'm excited to hear this answer.
one president? Or the alternative question is there a secret group actually running America? And is the president just one of those people? Is he just the face of it?
Sometimes life imitates fiction, sometimes fiction imitates life. There is this very interesting book that I read a long time ago, maybe two decades ago. It's called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's by Douglas Adams, one of the most celebrated science fiction comedies of all time. In this story, in this fictional universe, there is a character called Zaphod Beeblebrox, who is the president of the galaxy, the galactic president. His job as president is to divert attention from where the real power lies with his
Come
antics.
on now.
So I know it's fiction, but there is always a grain of truth in a fictional story. So I am not putting forth any conspiracy theory, but power is a mysterious substance. It's not always what it appears to be.
Facts.
There is this book called The Dictator's Handbook. Read that. That actually goes to the root of what power is. Power is never about one single person. You may have a single person who is the figurehead, the dictator, Saddam Hussein, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong. But that person can never be in power unless there is a group of people around him or her who are the trusted inner circle. The rule of power, the first rule of power is that the indispensable people whom you need to rule the country, keep that group as small as possible. And you need a larger pool of people who are the expendable, dispensable minions, but on whose loyalty you can count. Make that group as large as possible. So one group size you to minimize, the other group size you to maximize. And that's typically how power works. Now, when it comes to the US, we say that the US president is the leader of the free world, the most powerful man in the world. Thus far, it's been a man. Well, we currently have Mr. Joe Biden. How powerful does he appear to be? Does he even appear to be conscious, fully conscious, in full control of his faculties? It does not appear to be the case.
Nuh-uh.
And his deputy, the lady, what's her name? Kamala.
Yeah.
Madam Kamala Harris. She doesn't appear to have any leadership qualities at all. So then the question is, who's truly ruling the country? Because the country is being ruled, it's being administered, it's been run, governed, whatever.
Come on.
Who's really doing that? So in the US, it's no longer quite a conspiracy theory, the concept of the deep state. There is an unelected core body of unelected officials or whatever it is who are part of the government. They call it the deep state, whether it's the Pentagon or whatever. These people come to office, they are inducted in this organization, the Pentagon or whatever the core of this governance system is, and they are there for life. They are there for life. They're not elected by anyone.
How do they reach that?
I think there's a
I'm so glad that he answered it the way that I thought and the way that I figured. Because it just makes sense. It's just logical that, no, because I've seen too many times where it's like the president wants this to get passed or wants this to get passed and it doesn't get passed. And it's like, if he's the most powerful person on the planet, he's the president, he wants something to get passed and it don't get passed. You feel me? He's not the guy. He's not. How powerful is he if he can't get what he wants to happen to happen? So I was just like, he can't be. That makes a lot of sense. And I've always thought it's the people with the most money behind, know what I'm saying? Behind the scenes that are running things, that are pulling strings, that whatever they want to make happen, happens. You feel me? And so I just knew it. And I feel like anybody who just looks at it objectively, you know. And it's like, so when things happen over here, I don't blame the president anymore. With something like when prices go up, I'm not like, just the president, president. No, I'm like, because I don't think they're the ones impacted. Like, they're the most powerful. They may be a part of the group, like he said, but there's a group. It's not all just down to one person, so I can't put the blame on one person. And I feel like I sound like a conspiracy theorist at the moment. But 100% do not believe the president is the most powerful man in the world. 100% to believe there are other people behind the scenes pulling strings, making things happen. What they want to happen is happening. Do we know who those people are? We probably do, but we'll never be able to prove anything. So I love it. I'm loving this podcast, man. I'm locked in.
They're there for life. They're not elected by anyone.
How do they reach that team?
I think there's a whole vetting process and various criteria. For example, if you want to be an FBI agent, thousands of people apply, but only one out of a few thousand ever gets inside. The same thing was there with the KGB. It was an elite organization, the KGB. And similarly for the deep state, the Pentagon, etc., the CIA, FBI, you would have a very strict, rigorous vetting process. And only if you fulfill very stringent criteria, you know, your aptitude, your all of those things, then you would be inducted into that. And once you're in, you're in. After you have proven yourself up to a certain extent, there may be a probation period and all that. But once you're part of the inner circle, you're in, and nobody can dismiss you. You're not elected, and you essentially are, in some cases, maybe accountable to no one. Maybe only accountable to your inner circle and all that. So there seems to be a deep state in the US. I think people have been noticing that and pointing this out since the 1960s, since the days of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, right? That was 1966, was it? When he was assassinated? Yeah, that was the same year Lal Bahadur Shastri was also mysteriously found dead. It was a strange year. So from that time itself, and there are various books written about this, The Devil's Chessboard. That's one that comes to mind. There's plenty of literature about this. So for instance, in the John F. Kennedy assassination, the official version is that the president of the US in Dallas was shot by a single lone gunman from behind. That's the official version that is put out even today. Now the video, the film of the assassination, the actual recording is available. It's even there on YouTube. They say that he was shot from behind, from up there on a building. If you see the film of the assassination, you will find that when the motorcade comes into view, he's already clutching his throat, like something's hit him here. And then there is the kill shot, which is something I would not recommend anybody should watch. It's terrible. His head explodes in a cloud of blood and brain. And the impact of the bullet is from the front. His head whiplashes backwards like this. So clearly he was not shot from behind. Clearly. I mean, it's there for everybody to see. So they have been hiding.
After I watch this, I'm going to go check that out today. I'm going to go check that video out today. Because this is crazy.
Clearly. I mean, it's there for everybody to see. So they have been hiding the truth about the assassination of their own president. And God knows what else they've been hiding.
Why did they want to kill him?
Now, these are conspiracy theories. I don't have the answer, but people have various theories. One theory is that it is his own government, deep state, that had him killed off for whatever reason. Maybe he was getting too powerful, maybe he was too close to the mafia, maybe it was nepotism that they did not want, or maybe he was too much in favor of peace and not in favor of military expansionism. There are lots of theories.
Because there's money in military expansionism.
The military-industrial complex is what rules the US. That's another component of the deep
That's
state.
facts.
The military-industrial
That's
complex. One of the biggest industries in the US, apart from pharma, is the military complex. Yeah, and they sell weapons to the entire world. The Saudis are one of the biggest clients, which is why Saudi Arabia is a client state of the US. Okay, so there's a whole lot of murkiness going on here. So John F. Kennedy was in favor of peace. He was not in favor of military expansionism. So, for instance, the CIA had the African nationalist leader Patrice Lumumba assassinated. He was deposed in a military coup, and then he was executed, very unfortunately. This was done without the knowledge of John F. Kennedy. The invasion of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs invasion, was done without the approval of John F. Kennedy, because the US wanted to invade Cuba and get rid of Fidel Castro. The invasion failed because Kennedy did not provide the necessary military backup after the invasion was launched without his permission. So there were these tensions between the deep state and John F. Kennedy. And some people say that is why the American deep state had John F. Kennedy assassinated. There is no clear evidence for this. It's just speculation theory. Some would call it a conspiracy theory. But hey, is anybody able to prove this wrong? Not quite. You can't prove this right, you can't prove this wrong. So that's where we are, in limbo. So that is what we mean by the deep state. There is something deep down there which actually runs the country, perhaps, and that's where the power really may lie. Some people even talk about what you call the Illuminati, that there is a much deeper and much older network of very influential people that dates back to the East India Company days. All of this incredible amount of wealth that was taken from India, the wealth that Tipu Sultan had stolen from the natives of India, that was taken away by the British. He was a very wealthy man, Tipu Sultan. He had stolen all the wealth from the various temples he destroyed in southern India, Mysore region and all. That wealth disappeared. Who took it? Somebody took it. So much of this ancient wealth.
Dang, and I've never actually believed in the Illuminati. I've heard about the Illuminati, all these conspiracy theories about the Illuminati, but I've never actually believed in the Illuminati. But I do believe there's a group that runs the U.S. I don't, like I said, I don't know who they are. I can't prove who they are, but I believe the president is just a figurehead. He may be part of the group, but he's a figurehead. And I like that book. It said to divert attention from where the real power is. But I don't know. Could they be the Illuminati? I don't know.
From India, some people claim, is now in the hands of certain very old wealthy families that never reveal themselves. And maybe that's what we call the Illuminati. And these people may be distributed across Europe and the Americas, because the most powerful people don't recognize any boundaries or borders. That's only for common small people like us, right?
Yeah. And they also say the actual richest people in the world aren't on the world's rich lists.
No, of course they won't be on the rich list. Those are the chota mota log, the small fry, the small fish, the ones who are on the rich list. And the ones who are on the rich list, the top 2%, they aspire to move to the next level, to achieve nirvana and go to the higher plane of existence among the true rich. So that's what people claim, that these are the conspiracy theories out there.
This is crazy.
Okay, do you wish to talk a little bit more about Bill Clinton, or do you wish to talk about George W. Bush?
Well, George W. Bush has been one of the most entertaining presidents of the US. Bill Clinton was the red-blooded Democrat, but George W. Bush was the gaffe-prone president. Really funny guy, unintentionally. So, he came to power after George W. Bush, which year was it? 2000. And it was a very, very, very narrow election victory against Al Gore. It went down to the wire. But eventually George W. Bush Jr. Came to power, and he spent the first few months playing golf and doing whatever.
And then 9/11 happened.
Those planes flew themselves apparently into the World Trade Center towers. Terrible night. I remember it very vividly because I kind of saw it almost live. The second the second plane. So that happened, and so that's when George W. Bush had to man up, become the president finally. And he said that we're going to smoke them out. You're either with us or against us. He launched an invasion of Afghanistan first. And Pakistan was the linchpin behind that invasion. It all went through Pakistan. Yeah.
I gotta stop this conversation for just a bit. Have you seen the Netflix documentary on 9/11? So it's called Turning Point 9/11. Very heavy watch where they have actual witness accounts, etc., etc. Makes you really understand the gravity of how intense that terrorist attack was.
Oh yeah.
We had a pretty intense terrorist attack back in 2008 in India.
Yes.
The 26/11 attack. This was also very brutal in its own way. In saying that, and I'm trying to say this in the most empathetically aware state of mind. There are conspiracy theories spoken about all over the world that possibly even this was an orchestrated attack to be able to fuel or hasten up the next big geopolitical move. Yeah. And I know this is a very controversial statement.
I've heard conspiracy
and I
theories
say this
about
with
that.
deep empathy as well as sensitivity to the situation. But I would also like to have a bit of a commentary on this angle. Do you have anything to say so?
Yes, so many people, they would be termed conspiracy theorists. They have alleged that maybe this was an inside job. Some people have claimed, I've seen this in various documentaries at some point in time, that there were, those demolition charges were placed in the building, and when it came down, it was like a controlled demolition. The building did not come down at an angle; it came down like as if it was a controlled demolition. That's what they have alleged. Some people said there was another building right next to the World Trade Center towers that also came down mysteriously for no reason whatsoever. Then they say that when the Pentagon was hit, where is the evidence of the plane? You don't see a single engine. You don't see any superstructure of the tail or whatever, any wings. You just see a destroyed building. When it comes to the other flight that went down in a field, you don't see any trace of an aircraft. When an aircraft crashes for whatever reason, you see traces of aircraft parts.
For sure.
Engines typically, wings, windows, you would see luggage, you would see bodies of people. There was nothing there. So these are some claims people have made.
Hold up.
And from the photographs, it looks like they are accurate claims. So the question truly is, what really happened? Now, I am not one of those people who claim that this is true because I don't have sufficient evidence to prove it this way or that way. So I think one would have to stick with the official theory, or the official claim is that there were 4 planes. 2 at the World Trade Center towers, 1 at the Pentagon, and 1 went down in a field because the people wrestled the pilots down and they made the plane crash. So yeah, there is a lot of ambiguity. The Pentagon doesn't show any images. The photographs of the Pentagon don't show any evidence of a plane there. There's even a video, a static camera video, closed circuit TV camera or whatever, which captured the moment of impact. You just see a big orange explosion. You don't see any plane there. So that's kind of very, very perplexing. Again, in the field, there's no plane debris. There's just a big hole in the ground which is burned up. So kind of makes you wonder what it is. But there's not sufficient evidence to prove that something else happened. But yeah, some people claim it's an inside job, and who knows?
I have to ask you about...
Nah. It's crazy, dog. This is getting wild, dog. They about to have me thinking about this all day, dog. Like conspiracy. They about to have me jump into a rabbit hole of conspiracies, dog. I'm about to go on YouTube and go crazy about this stuff because this is legit insane. But it's like after the stories that I've heard about the U.S., like I wouldn't put it past with Jesus. They could have done something like that. I don't like him. I don't know. This is my first time hearing it, so like I don't even have enough information. I don't have as much information as him, and he said he don't got the sufficient proof. So, bro, this podcast is mind blowing, dog. Like, I feel like my eyes really getting open listening to this. But that's the end of part 1, y'all. We gonna jump into part 2 tomorrow. Make sure y'all subscribe, ring notification bell, get the video a thumbs up. It's your boy Neal out.